Hey there, all you cool cats and kittens. Welcome back. This is part 6 of my build log of the Trumpeter 1 to 200 scale model of the Titanic. Got a bit of a mishmash today. I've done quite a few jobs, none of which really required a video in their own right. So I'm going to combine three things today. I'm going to talk about more porthole drilling, weathering of propellers, and also getting the model ready for painting. So without any further ado, let's crack on. So the first thing I'm going to talk about today is how I centre drilled the larger portholes on the model, because quite a few people have been asking me about this. So there's been a few people on YouTube showing their solutions to this problem. Most of them have made a metal drilling jig, and unfortunately I don't have access to any sort of metal machining tools like a lathe or a milling machine. So I had to rather simplify it. But in some respects, I think that's more useful on YouTube because I think most people probably don't have access to metalworking tools. So what I did is I made a drilling jig out of plastic, and this piece of plastic here it's actually the end cap for a syringe. I bought the syringes to make the filling of the portholes with UV resin easier, and it's just happened, it was just good luck really, that this end cap for the syringe was just the right diameter to locate in the large porthole indentations. Obviously not everyone's going to have this kind of piece of a kit, but really you could use any piece of circular plastic. What I did with this is I then drilled a 1mm hole, and this allowed me to centre drill all the holes. It's quite a simple process really. You use the plastic centre to locate in the large hole like this, and then you drill out the hole. Unfortunately my hand rather gets in the way for most of the shot, but it's fairly clear what I'm doing here. I'm just drilling out the hole using the plastic boss as a locator. Now, just because I didn't really think there's enough videos of me on YouTube drilling endless holes, I thought I'd add another one for you. So the next thing I'm going to cover is how I weathered my propellers. I'm using the propellers from the Pontos upgrade set, and they're absolutely lovely actually, but their only slight problem is they are very shiny. Titanic's propellers were made of bronze, and these look at the minute like they're made of a really highly polished brass. So I'm going to do something about that. I'm not going to weather them too much because obviously, bear in mind Titanic was pretty new when she sank, but I do want to weather them a little bit just to take that sheen off and to make them look more like bronze than brass. So I tested out my ideas first of all on the four-bladed central propeller. The Pontos kit actually comes with two options for the central propeller. You can either use a 4-blade or a 3-blade. This is because there's a big debate going on continually among Titanic enthusiasts over what type of propeller was fitted on the ship. I can say with absolute sincerity, I really don't want to get into a debate about this. I've had my fair share of debates about that over the years, and I really can't be bothered with another one. I'm personally going to fit a 3-bladed propeller, which is why I'm using the 4-bladed propeller as a bit of a test piece. So the first thing that I did was I cleaned it up thoroughly, and I also filed little bits and bobs down because there were a couple of casting lines on the actual blades of the propeller which I wanted to get flat as possible. I then used a really fine grade bit of sandpaper, which is 400 grit, just to take off this sort of gold sheen on the top. This left me with a propeller that sort of had a sort of coppery bronze kind of look to it. Still a bit too shiny for my liking, but certainly moving in the right direction. So the next thing I did was I went downstairs to the kitchen and raided the cupboards and got some white wine vinegar and some salt and made a sort of pickling cocktail. And I kept the prop in that overnight for about 12 hours or so. When I came back the next morning, it didn't seem like very much had happened. Certainly the propeller looked very similar to how it had done the previous night. So what I did was I rinsed it off and I left it on a spoon with just a very small amount of the vinegar and salt on. And this is when the propeller started to tarnish, and it actually started to tarnish very quickly. It was actually noticeable with the naked eye. So I left it to tarnish for a while until I was happy with it. And then I stopped the tarnishing process by cleaning it off with water and dipping the propeller in wax to prevent any more air getting to it. And this is the final result I was left with. I think it's actually come out pretty nicely. If anything, a little bit overdone, really. I think it's probably got a little bit too much weathering on it now. But certainly I was quite happy with this, so I decided to use the same procedure with the 3 propellers I was going to use, but just not let them tarnish for as much time. I then did the same thing with the wing propellers. I lightly sanded them down with 400 grit sandpaper and then pickled them overnight in a mixture of vinegar and salt. The next morning, once I took them out of the vinegar and salt, they started tarnishing. The tarnishing happens really quickly. All of these photos are only taken over about 5 minutes. Once I was happy with the level of tarnish I'd got, I cleaned the parts thoroughly in water to remove the vinegar and salt, and then I dipped the blades in wax to protect them from the air. I then painted the bits that needed painting with anti-fouling red paint. So the last part of this video is my getting the model ready for painting. And so to do this I needed to get all of the exterior components attached to the model. Things like the bilge keel, which I'm doing here, and also there's a couple of photo etch parts which I'll show you in a moment. So to attach the bilge keel I used some masking tape to hold the component in place, and then I used Tamiya extra thin plastic cement to glue it in place. The next thing I had to do was to attach some photo etch grills to a low point on the hull. So to start with I cut out the photo etch with a very sharp knife, and I then bent it to the curvature of the hull using an appropriately shaped piece of plastic. I then attached it to the hull using some cyanoacrylate adhesive. Other final bits and bobs I had to do to get the model ready for painting was to countersink all of the insides of the portholes. That was a fairly long job. To be honest, it probably took me about as long as drilling the portholes out in the first place, but absolutely essential for ensuring that light passes through the portholes effectively. The other thing that I had to do was just to make sure that there was no swarf left inside the portholes. On a couple of the smaller portholes there was some flakes and stuff left over from the drilling process, and obviously I had to clear them out the way before I go anywhere near painting the model, so I spent quite a long time doing that. The other thing that I've done is mask every moving part up. So I've masked up my prop shafts here, just using pretty cheap masking tape. I've bunged up the top of the rudder, and I've also masked the outside of the rudder, which I'm going to paint by hand, and the external parts of the prop shafts. and that makes the model ready for painting. So there we are, a lot of good jobs done there. The propellers, um, uh, it's one of these sort of strange things really. Propellers live in a fairly unpleasant environment, and to be honest, the amount of time I spent on them is probably fairly academic, because they're going to start weathering and such when they're in the water propelling the ship anyway. So over the course of time they are going to wear in their own way, and that's absolutely unavoidable, but nonetheless I'm really happy with the result I got. So we're now ready for painting. One final thing, the videos may start to slow down over the next couple of months, and the reason for that is I'm on the verge of buying my first house, and so because of that I'm probably not going to be able to spend as much time on the model as I would like. You know, I'm going to be moving stuff across from one house to another, I'm going to be decorating, fitting carpets, getting everything the way I want it, so like I say, I'm probably not going to be able to spend as much time on the model as I would like, but in the fullness of time I'll get back up to speed. So that's it for this video. I hope it was informative for you and you got some useful sort of ideas maybe. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and maybe even think about subscribing, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.